In a previous vlog, I talked about value propositions, and I talked about them as part of an important three-step progression that goes from a value proposition, which a product manager has to define, that moves on to positioning, which defines how we want people to think about the value we create relative to alternatives, and finally results in messaging, which is typically done by marketing, and those are the exact messages we want to send to the market. Today, I would like to talk about how, as a product manager, you should capture value propositions. Hi, I'm Greg with Prickrell Consulting, and in that vlog, I said if value propositions aren't written down, they don't do anybody a whole lot of good. So there are a lot of templates you can use to capture value propositions, and that's certainly something you as a product manager should do. I'm going to go through a couple that are probably more appropriate for pitches, and then go through some templates, some ways to capture value propositions that are really more appropriate if you want to drive the positioning and messaging with marketing. So the first one comes from Steve Blank, and the template basically looks like we help X do Y, or we help X do Y by doing Z. So an example of that would be, we help people stay mobile in an effective, inexpensive way by providing ride sharing. That might be a statement that Uber would put together. So we see what we're producing and the value that we're delivering to, in this case, people who want to be mobile. There is another example or another template where you use an analog in the market already. You have to be super careful with this. You can sound really cheesy, but if there is a company that, you like their business model, you like what they're doing, and you're kind of doing your own flavor, you can communicate a lot of information in a very concise statement. So you can say something like, we are the Uber of trucks. So maybe in trucking there's a need for a service like Uber. You can say something like, we are the Facebook of insurance adjusters. We are the Tesla of lawnmowers, or the Tesla of toasters. So as I said, you have to be careful not to sound too cheesy, but very concise statement that communicates a lot of information. If we look at more robust templates, probably the most well-known comes from Geoffrey Moore. And it's really a positioning statement. We're going to focus on the part of it that captures the value proposition. He talks about these 6 lines. I won't read the template to you. There's a lot of blank spaces in there. So let me just share an example with you. I think that's the best way to understand it. So if I'm thinking about a camera surveillance solution for cities, I might have a value proposition that sounds like this. For cities that are dedicated to public safety, our video surveillance solution automatically detects dangers so that people in cities feel safer and are more likely to survive dangerous situations. So here we're talking about public safety that's facilitated by surveillance. And there's some things that might not be obvious here, but we really have to name the stakeholder. And here we're talking about cities. We're selling to cities. In the B2B space, you've probably heard me say in other vlogs that this idea of a customer is really a compound entity. There are a lot of people that you have to think about. Who's buying the solution? Who's going to use the solution? Who's installing the solution? Who administers the solution? All those things. So I came up with a template that I think is a little more appropriate in the B2B space. It captures the customer stakeholder for whom we are generating value. It captures the problem, and then captures this idea of how the world changes or how the customer's life is better by having used our product. And once again, you can see the template. I will read an example here. So, for city leaders in mid-sized European cities who face challenges with urban safety, we offer a video surveillance solution that cost-effectively identifies or detects danger, resulting in an increased feeling of safety for people in the city. And the idea is that there's not just one value proposition for your product, especially in the B2B space. each one of these customer stakeholders that I mentioned, the economic buyer like the CEO, an operator, an administrator, a manager, has a separate value proposition. And what you should do as a product manager is capture them at that level so that you can help marketing do the best positioning and messaging possible. I've done some experiments in the past working with clients. The example that I'm showing doesn't conform to any one of these examples, but is very similar. And I captured the different elements of the value proposition in different columns in a spreadsheet. And then in one big calculated column, I just stick it all together. The advantage there is that later I can do pivots based on the stakeholder, based on the feature. Very often you need to articulate a value proposition at the feature, not just the product level. So that is something that you can play with. And finally, a few years ago, book came out as a follow-up to Business Model Generation, and Osterwalder, Pineur, et al. Have defined this value proposition canvas. As you can see, it's a fairly robust tool, complicated relative to these simple text templates for capturing value propositions. So I would recommend that you take a look at that. In practice, I've had good experiences with the value proposition canvas. I've had more complicated experience with the value proposition canvas, but I think it can be a really important tool for stimulating thought around value propositions in general. So I hope this was valuable for you. Now go out and capture your value propositions.